Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our EDC Coffee Chat, Coffee with Colleen. We're really honored to have our Director of Community Development, Bruce Emery, on today to talk to us about the state mandated comprehensive plan process and the Growth Management Act that is done. It's going to every 10 years, but right now it's every 8 years. And as I understand, they'll be kicking that off this year so that we have a comprehensive plan set and ready to go by June 30th of 2025. So it's all about that. What does the state say we have to do? What is the process? What are the risks? What could the outcomes be? And what are you hearing the community says about what our needs are? So with that, Bruce, thank you so much for joining us. And I will let you take it away. I didn't ask if you had slides. If you do, I'm happy to share screen.
Yes, I do have slides. If you want to share screen, that'd be great.
I will do that. All right. Okay. Go right ahead. Oh, and quickly, everyone, if you will put yourself on mute or I will mute you so we don't inadvertently pick up any background noise. I'd appreciate that. And if you have questions for Bruce, you can either put them in the chat and I'll ask them for you, or you can raise your hand and we'll call on you and you can ask your question, whichever you prefer. Okay, thanks, Bruce. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Colleen. First of all, happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Myself I'm here to provide a little bit of this presentation, but also my Deputy Director, Holden Fleming, is with us, and he's going to talk quite a bit about the public outreach portion of our planning update process. But I'll get underway. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So the Growth Management Act was adopted in 1990, and it is the primary state level legislation that covers land use and environmental regulation in the state of Washington. At the time, about 2/3 of the counties and the cities within those counties were required to do planning under the act. Clallam County was one of them based on the growth that we were experiencing at that time. There are 15 goals currently in the act. We are to designate urban growth, areas appropriate for urban growth, policies to reduce sprawl, transportation planning policies to ensure that our transportation grid is adequate to meet the demand of that growth, a housing plan to accommodate housing for all segments of the population, economic development policies to encourage economic growth to help sustain population growth, establish clear principles and regulations to protect private property from unlawful takings, establish processes for timely permitting, maintaining natural resource industries, including timber, aggregate mining, agriculture, and yeah, that's about it. Establishing policies for open space and recreation to ensure quality of life as the community grows. Protection of the environment. There's a high threshold for ensuring the protection of critical areas, for example, wetlands, stream corridors, geologically hazardous areas like landslide hazardous areas prone to erosion and critical aquifer recharge. we need to plan for citizen participation in the planning process so that it's not just a kind of a bureaucratic exercise that actually involves and reflects the values of the community. We are to plan for public facility needs. The services and the facilities such as sewer, water, communications, et cetera, are adequate again to serve development as it occurs. To provide
Hey, Bruce,
for, yeah,
real quick, can you put it in full screen modes? The words are a little small. Slideshow, and then
let's see, you're going to have to instruct me on how best to do that. Because this one
okay.
is the one that's a little truncated.
Okay, see slideshow up there at the top? One of the tabs at the top where it says you got file home, go over to the right, there's slideshow. I've got my cursor on it. That's not helping you.
It isn't. Are you talking about is it a Zoom function or is it a?
No, it's a PowerPoint function. So
sorry.
you're
right
go
under
up.
the orange banner.
Or
Right.
down at the bottom. There's icons at the bottom.
Okay.
I'm not getting any of that. I apologize.
Well,
Wait a
TV
minute. Let me
screen,
see.
almost, you're almost there. Go over two.
Go to the right. Go to the right.
One more.
There you go.
I've learned something. Is that helpful?
Let's see. Now you want display settings. Go up. Display settings.
Okay.
Okay. Now click down on that and yeah, I think it's that one.
Duplicate slideshow?
No.
Sorry.
No, I'm the one who's sorry. This isn't helping at all.
Maybe Colleen, you could share it?
I could. Let me try to help out here. Let me see if Mitch, you sent it to me last night, right?
I emailed you as well.
You
yesterday.
emailed it. Okay. Okay. Let me find that and I can pull it up for you. Too many emails yesterday. Okay. And sorry about this, guys. It's not coming up. I'm not seeing it here. Okay, I don't have it right now.
All right.
So,
Just made a full screen.
Do you want to email it to me or Lori? We can do it.
well, if you go to, okay.
No. What shall I do, Colleen?
Well, why don't,
Can I just talk us through this one? Because this is
Yeah,
the small,
absolutely.
this is the small print.
yep.
All right. So we were on historic preservation, identify and encourage the preservation of historic places and features. Climate change and resiliency. We're going to talk a little bit more about this one. It's actually a new element in the Growth Management Act that was adopted just last year. And then lastly, shoreline management. We are to integrate the requirements of the Growth Management Act concerning critical area protection in our shoreline master programs, so that they are administered through the SMA and the SMP and not just under our critical areas code. There's sort of a jurisdictional issue there. That's the point of this element. And anything within 200 feet of shorelines falls under the Shoreline Management Act. And the courts have been clear that there's a division between that and the Growth Management Act, yet there's also a need to protect critical areas. So the Growth Management Act was amended to require us to integrate those protection standards into our SMP, which we have done. So we'll get away from the small wording. I want to touch briefly on well, first of all, let me circle back. The whole point here is the primary focus in a Growth Management Act update. Why isn't this sharing? Did the screen change
Yeah.
for you guys?
It looks good. It's fine.
We're under notable changes to the GMA?
Yes, yes.
Okay, for some
That's
reason
what
the
we're
other one
saying.
didn't. All right. The intent of the GMA update is first and foremost to amend our comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan is really a policy statement. It acts as sort of an umbrella for all of the regulatory programs that the county administers concerning land use. So when we amend our comprehensive plan and change those policies, we then have to take a look at our zoning code, our land division code, the critical areas code, all of our natural resource regulations like our gravel mining ordinance and our forestry ordinance, and also our shoreline master program, and make sure that they too are updated to reflect those policies established in the updated comprehensive plan. Fundamentally to the Growth Management Act is the idea that concerning urban growth, we have to locate that within cities and designated urban growth areas. And that's very critical because everything outside of that has to be rural in nature or has to be designed for the protection of natural resources. And what that has turned into over time through court modification, if you will, is that urban growth areas generally need to have a residential density pattern of at least 4 units per acre or greater to be compliant. Now, there are some exceptions to that. And in rural areas, the density can only be 1 home per 5 acres or less. And again, there are some exceptions to that, but they're very limited. The idea being is that, you know, if we're gonna, for example, we're in a housing crisis, how do we solve it? Well, we really have to focus on the urban growth areas for our solution in that, because the GMA limits our ability to do that outside of the urban growth areas. Let's see. And as noted, we're currently in an 8-year update cycle. After this cycle is complete, we will be required to update our comprehensive plan and development regulations once every 10 years. Now, that brings us up to what we have before us. Since 2018, in our last update, there's been several changes to the Act. And some of the more notable ones is under 3678-070, we're required to develop policies and regulations to reduce and mitigate risk of wildfire. I'm not going to dovetail this into any discussion on the wildlands urban interface, but that is certainly kind of part of that whole legislative effort to be mindful of the risk of wildfire and to actually develop regulatory standards to help protect homeowners and business owners from the risk of wildfire.
So do you envision that one being that, like, you wouldn't have smaller properties or lots near commercial forest land? Or what, how would that change our comprehensive plan, that element potentially?
That's a good question. And quite frankly, I'm not sure how to answer that yet. I do know some of the strategies that they've come up with, for example, in the WUI.
That's the wildland urban interface.
Correct. And under its current iteration, and we don't know if it's going to stay that way. That's why I want to steer clear of going too heavily into that. But ensuring there's separation, clear zones around properties, and being mindful when your development is located closer to like a contiguous forested area, a working forest, for example, that has a monoculture of tree stand. And in those situations, there's an increased risk. There is a risk of a dry summer, a spark hitting it from, a storm coming through or something, and you could be in harm's way. So there's things that, we can do in terms of development techniques to reduce that risk, to reduce the spread if and when a fire does occur. And those are the kinds of things that they're encouraging us to develop policy and regulation to address.
Okay.
Housing assessments, and there's always been a housing element required in the comprehensive plan, but now it's very specific about evaluating and establishing policies based on the needs of different income segments in the community. And so this is definitely going to be a hot button topic that I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in, myself included, in coming up with some responses to the current crisis that we're in to help increase housing opportunity and facilitate development of housing, primarily in our urban growth areas, but not exclusively there.
And that's about an impossibility, that you cannot build a home for what the median income is today. It just doesn't add up.
Right.
And so
you're absolutely, you're right, Colleen, but the question that I think we will be grappling with, we will not be able to solve all of it, but what can we solve? Okay. What are the components of it? Because this isn't something that Clallam County alone is going to solve. This also has to do with supply chain. This has to do with demand. And the elephant in the room is the regulatory program being handed to us on a 3-year basis by the state. Those all contribute substantially to the cost. And there's other things, but they contribute substantially to the reduction in available housing stock, which is the primary problem that's creating competition and forcing the price out of reach for most people. But there are things we can do. Number one, we can evaluate our zoning programs in the urban growth areas and create broader permissibility to facilitate not just single family development, but multifamily development, which has been woefully lacking in this area. Secondly, and perhaps most importantly, is we have to overcome the roadblocks to getting service extension, not only in the unincorporated urban growth areas, but in the cities themselves. There's a lot of rebuild that has to occur. Quite frankly, I think that both the state and federal level has to recognize that that's a key component of the crisis, that they have to help local jurisdictions meet that demand and provide the funding necessary to do it. And the sooner the better. It only becomes more expensive as time goes on, as more development occurs. And the other piece of this is, as development occurs, if we don't have the urban services available, it doesn't occur at the density we need to meet the demand. And so getting the pipes in the ground is essential in allowing for the density that will actually help. It won't cover all of it, but it will help contribute to solving this problem. We have a broader requirement under recent legislation that requires us to coordinate with and develop MOUs with tribes that are affected by land use decisions in our area. So we look forward to collaborating with the tribes on this and developing an outreach plan that not only meets the act, but does it in a productive way, so that we're not just checking a box, but we're actually increasing community involvement and community buy-in in what we're proposing. The climate resiliency element under 070 subsection 9 requires us to to plan for climate change and create hazard mitigation planning to address the risks that we anticipate seeing. In Clallam County, fire risk, wildfire risk is certainly one of the elements. But what about our water resources? If our precipitation patterns continue to change, what effect will that have on our municipal and group water systems? What about the groundwater that a lot of people in the rural area depend on? These are the kinds of things that we have to ask, evaluate, and come up with fixes that ensure that we have options going into the future. And you know, when this first came about, we kind of viewed, wow, that's a big lift. How are we going to do that? But since coming about, I see that as a highly valuable challenge that we face, that if we get it right, we're going to position ourselves very well to weather whatever storm is coming our way. And so that's what I'm focused on. I want to view these things as tools that give us broader resiliency and help the community develop over time in a way that doesn't harm us, that doesn't leave us hamstrung. And one of the other ones is there's been a lot of effort to address the housing crisis. So in urban growth areas, one of the significant changes is the act now requires that jurisdictions cannot limit the use of accessory dwelling units in urban growth areas. They're still silent in the rural areas. We do have detached ADU standards, which we want to protect. But in urban growth areas, you have to be able to allow at least 2 accessory dwelling units on lawfully established lots within the urban growth area. And that is a useful thing. Now, we have to be mindful, okay, how will that look 20, 40 years from now? Will it still be accepted by the community, or are we inviting issues of congestion and you know, some of the ill effects that can spin off from unplanned development? So we're going to be taking a very careful look at that, meeting the intent of the act and providing opportunity for housing, but not doing it in a way that creates spin-off problems that we have to deal with at a later date.
So a question on that, the one about tribes and coordination and memorandums of understanding, am I right that if the land is in trust or reservation status, a local municipality has no authority over their lands, but if the tribe owns it fee simple, like all of us do, then it does have to meet the regulations of the municipality in which it resides.
That's correct.
So they want to obviously coordinate on those properties that they own, but like, for example, the Lower Elwha tribe is located next to or very close to the west urban growth area of Port Angeles. Is that, like, how would that interaction look for a memorandum of understanding?
Well, that's a good question, and it's not one that I think I can answer with any clarity, except to say on a broad level, we want them to be aware of what we're doing, and we want to be aware of what they're doing and what their future plans are, and see if there's a way of harmonizing the two. If it means that we're looking at a different boundary or a different impact area beyond our own urban growth area, perhaps what we can do is revisit the growth area boundary. At the end of the day, they pretty much can do what they want to do, but it doesn't mean that they want to just go bulldoze everything. And I think that by creating the dialogue, we can get the interests aligned and make sure that we're not stepping on each other's toes as we're moving forward and trying to solve some of these broader problems. So it's critical that we bring them into the discussion. It is interesting. I did hear a representative from one of the tribes indicate that in their view, some of this coordination requirement, we already have good coordination. We have good discussion with the tribes. And the thought is that there seems to be maybe not such a rosy cooperation kind of east of the Cascades, so that they thought that that was more what the legislation was intending. But that said, like everything else, I'd rather use this as a tool to really kind of establish some positive movement than just have it be a box that we check and say we've done that. So
Okay.
I plan on using it. And I think
Got it.
that the Board of Commissioners are behind that as well.
Got it.
So the process, and I'm just going to talk just a little bit more, then I'm going to turn it over to Holden. The GMA update process in a nutshell, we start kind of with coordinating with the cities, the countywide planning policies, which we did a reiteration of that back in 2018, and it's a very good document, and it sets forth a framework for how we make land use choices, in particular in the urban growth areas where our planning decisions will have a direct impact on the city's future, if you will, because it's the urban growth areas that at some point become eligible for annexation into the cities. As the cities extend urban services, just leaving that in the county doesn't make sense. They're making an investment, and how you do that is very important. I mean, obviously, you don't want them just reaching out and grabbing new shopping centers and ignoring the needs of the community in the surrounding area. So part of this is how annexation occurs over time. The other piece of this is, as important as urban growth areas are, there's a limit on how big they can be. They have to be based on projected growth over the next 20 years. And depending on how that gets allocated, does it get allocated within the city limits? Does it get allocated to the urban growth area? That's part of the discussion that we have basically in the coming weeks to kind of hash out exactly where we are and what the cities can expect and what we can expect. And then based on that, we each do our planning effort around those numbers. So it's a very important part of the process.
The growth over the next 20 years, is that identified by the Office of Financial Management, OFM? Or how, who's to say what that's going to be?
There's some, it's a little broader now. We can actually, we have to make educated guesses and show our work. But there is we can choose a low, medium, or high estimation. I think there's a lot of justification in Clallam County. The estimation should be high. We're a desirable place for people to move. So that said, it does start with the figures provided by the Office of Financial Management. So that's very important because there is a limitation on it. And again, we have to show our work. It has to be sound. If we do something flaky, Commerce may not accept it. We have to revisit or we may be challenged on it, and the Growth Hearings Board may not accept it, and that could be very problematic, not only for the county but for the cities. So it's got to be a good faith effort to do our best math going forward. Let's see. So the process. Countywide planning policies, we actually, we were a little bit late in getting responses to our RFP, but we actually have 2 firms that have responded to doing the assisting us with the general update requirement. We expect to be making a recommendation to the board for their work session next Monday. So they're going to be coming on board pretty quick. They're going to help us with the scoping, the gap analysis, and also starting the SEPA process, review under the State Environmental Policy Act, which requires that we evaluate the impact of the decisions that we make here, not only on the natural environment, but also the built environment. So it's a useful planning document, and it's a useful exercise to kind of truth where we're going as we develop these policy changes throughout this process. And it will parallel this process probably resulting in a supplemental EIS, adding to the prior EIS that was done early on in the whole GMA process. Key to all this is the public outreach process. It isn't just coordinating with tribes, it's coordinating with everybody in the county. Holding community meetings on the east end, central and west end of the county, listening and responding to local concerns. And as we develop policy choices, providing scoping, in other words, saying we could go a couple of ways with this. What do you think about those ideas? And getting that public feedback, documenting it, and helping it drive sort of the direction that we go, mindful of what we also have to achieve under the Act. As this gets refined, we then start our process with the Planning Commission with, draft documents, draft comprehensive plan amendments, and possibly development regulations at the earliest possible date. I think that's where the rubber meets the road, where people really see its impact. And it also, so there's a parallel public outreach process throughout this. So it means having public work sessions on it, and then formal hearings as we begin to refine it down to a working document. And then once the Planning Commission is through with that process, they formulate the recommendation, goes to the Board of County Commissioners, who will hold one or more hearings on this before adopting the changes. And we provide notice to the Department of Commerce. There's a 60-day notice requirement. And then at the conclusion, providing our update and also a report showing our work. So in a nutshell, that's it. Sounds really neat and tidy. It's not. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Holden to talk a little bit more about the public outreach process. Holden, you there?
Okay, yeah, I think I'm off mute. So first, thank you, Bruce, for sending it my way. Second, Colleen, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Every time I'm on here, it's amazing how many people tune in early. I will say I'm a little disappointed I did not get my coffee. And so the coffee with Colleen, I feel like that would have been nice. With that, we'll go ahead and jump in here. Bruce, I know has kind of touched on a little bit of what is entailed in this slide, and I'll kind of be quick to that because I know we want to get to the question and answer session. I think that's equally as important as what we're bringing to the table today. And then also I know at least one other person in this room here today has actually already heard this presentation. And so I don't know how many times they want to listen to the same, thought processes. But essentially, as we're working through this comp plan update, just like Bruce said, the public engagement component is very important. And so what we're really looking at here is throughout this process, I've kind of identified 6 key kind of checkpoints that'll be a great opportunity for, the public at large to keep track of kind of where we're at in the process, but also opportunities where we're going to be going out and looking for input, looking for feedback. And so it starts really with the checklist. The Department of Commerce provides each jurisdiction basically a rundown kind of all of those changes to the GMA that have taken place since our last update that Bruce had kind of talked about, and then lines that up against all of those 15 different areas that are requirements within the GMA. And so this checklist really is a great intro point into the process because it's an opportunity to basically use that checklist as a mirror for our community to take a look at ourselves, figure out where we think we're still doing pretty well, and then what areas we need to focus our attention on, where we want to see that change taking place, or where we might be, where because of RCW changes or updates, we're currently out of compliance. And so we'll work hard to get that checklist put together, and then out of that, we'll move forward and we'll put together an outreach plan. That's where we'll lay out basically from now all the way until June of 2025. And we'll identify the opportunities we have for public engagement like we're doing here today. And then that's when we'll start talking about that draft comp plan. We'll use that checklist. We'll use the feedback that we're starting to receive through the public outreach process. And then we'll start to work with a consultant and work with internal staff and work with external stakeholders and tribes and cities and interested parties. And we'll start looking at how to shape the next version of our comprehensive plan. I think it is kind of interesting, you know, as we look at the comp plan, you know, as a tool. One of the things to keep in mind is that, you know, these comp plans are supposed to look out 20 years into the future. What will Clallam County be? You know, and that's 2025, so 2045. But as we've already kind of talked about today, we actually are required to update our comp plan at least every 10 years moving forward. And so the vision of the comp plan is always, you know, further out than what the comp plan realistically, you know, is going to get updated, the timeline within that. And so it really leads to this interesting scenario where we're always projecting future goals out well ahead of whenever we know that we're going to have to get back into it and you know, rectify and make changes. But with any sort of luck, you know, we'll put together a draft comp plan, and out of that comp plan, we'll solicit more feedback, and then that becomes the comp plan that we end up sending off to Commerce and sending to the Board of County Commissioners for the review. Now, if anybody is like me, they've actually already went ahead and read the rest of the slide as I'm talking, and so you can kind of see with the charts that I have underneath here, kind of how that comp plan leads into draft regulations and then updated regulations around development. And so that's really what I'm just going to jump to down here is, you know, it's almost a nesting doll type situation, wherein our comprehensive plan is the framing document that we use to kind of set a vision for Clallam County. It's you know, it allows us to really identify, you know, the things that are unique to Clallam County and put those into writing. You know, every county in the state operates underneath the GMA. But within that, you know, the state of Washington does not provide Clallam County with a comprehensive plan and said, this is what is best for you. It really is the opposite. Instead, you know, through grassroots effort and through public engagement and through process, Clallam County tells Washington State, this is what we see for our future. But then out of that, we have to have some development regulations. So we really try to put together, you know, we take a look at the existing regulations that we have. Our planners upstairs deal with those regulations on a day in and day out basis. If we have any realtors in the group, they deal with those regulations on a day-to-day basis. If we have any developers in the room, they are, again, very familiar with those development regulations. And so this is an opportunity, again, for us to take a look at the regulations that we have, figure out what's working for us, and then figure out what isn't working for us. A long time ago, when I was first starting off in local government, we had a big project that we were working on, and we had a consultant, and we were trying to rank projects around this kind of scoring rubric. And out of that, you know, we went through the whole process of ranking and evaluating based on this rubric. And then the consultant said something that's always stuck with me, and it struck me as odd at the time, but I think there might be some value in it. And it was the idea that if you go through the process and the rubric didn't yield the results that you wanted or results that are beneficial to you, change the rubric. And so I look at that with a very similar light to development regulations. If the regulations that we're putting in place are not actually leading to the results that we need them to lead to, you know, enacting the plans and policies within the comp plan to get us to where we want to be in 10 or 20 years, then we have to be willing to change those development regulations to align them with our comp plan. And so that's what we're trying to do here is we need to align our development regulations with the comprehensive plan. And then a natural outflow of that is these development regulations are actually the things that, you know, change the built environment here in Clallam County, that directly, you know, shape the development that we have here in our community. And so, you know, when a new structure comes up, when you know, a piece of land gets short platted out and, you know, 4 new houses come up or whatever it is, you know, I think it's really important to remember that, you know, while that is the change to the built environment, the process really did start all the way back with that comp plan leading into development regulations and then the development then of Clallam County. And so I haven't spoke directly to it, but I do think it is important. As we talk about this comprehensive plan, we've gone over the RCWs that are relevant. We've gone over the goals of the GMA. But I really do want to stress the importance, again, of that public input in this process, and that it is the voices from our community that greatly shape whatever document we end up with. And so we'll go to the next slide here. And I want to be very clear that this process, it will take all of us. Again, I was looking at the list here of attendance, and I was really pleased to see the wide array of groups that are represented here. Because as we go to shape this comp plan into a document that represents all of Clallam County, it's going to take a variety of voices in that conversation. It's going to take a variety of professional inputs, but also personal inputs along this way. And so then there's a real question of, well, what does that process look like? What tools are we going to use? And in this slide, what I've basically tried to talk about here is the different levels of public engagement and public involvement. And so at the far left there, and I've put it a little bit lower than the others, because all of these do have value, but along the hierarchy of involvement, the lowest really is just informing. That's something like what me and Bruce are doing here today. If we were to stop right after this PowerPoint presentation and just end, all we've done is inform you of things. And there is a time and there's a place for that, and there is a valuable goal behind that. But as we work through this process, we do want to do more. Again, above informing, we have consulting. And each one of these has different kind of examples of what it could look like. So again, for the informing side, we've got fact sheets or websites talking to you like this. The consulting, we go a little bit higher. Now we're looking for public comment, which is what we're going to hopefully try to do a little bit after this, but also focus groups or surveys. We keep going up the list. Now we're involving people. This is where I think a lot of the work we'll be doing on the comp plan is going to lie, where it talks about workshops and the ability to really sit down and kind of get into the weeds on some of these issues and weigh things out. Past that, with collaboration, we could do things like stakeholder advisory committees, where we're looking at a specific subsection of the general public, and we're like, hey, you guys are an expert in this area. Tell us what is right, tell us what is wrong, and then let staff kind of balance those various inputs from the various stakeholder groups. And then, hopefully one day, we can get to the point where what we're really doing as staff here on this level is empowering the community to make decisions for themselves, because I think that's the goal in all of this. So with that said, again, I wanted to kind of leave some time for questions and answers. And so we can quickly go to the next slide. And I'll just talk really briefly about what we want to achieve with this comprehensive plan process. And so number one, first and foremost, is we want compliance with state law. The whole purpose of this periodic update is to recognize those changes in the state codes and make sure that we've reconciled our codes and our development regulations and our comp plan to come into line with those. Another big part of this, and again, I'm happy to see representatives from both SQUIM and Port Angeles on the call, because one of the things we want to talk about is the clear plan for service extensions into the UGAs. Right after that, we've got affordable housing goals that address the issue. I think, Colleen, you kind of pointed it out. Right now, under market conditions, we can't build a house to hit our median income. That's obviously a problem. And so how do we create affordable housing goals that actually address the key issues? And maybe not just the most obvious, bright, ones, but some of those core things there. Again, UGA densities and design standards, allowing for those 2 ADUs in the urban growth areas. What will that look like? Whenever we get rid of that homeowner occupancy requirement, how do we make sure that this doesn't become something that we don't want it to become? And then really, realizing what benefits it's also going to give us with creating more flexibility in housing development. So right after housing development, and I'm going to talk a little bit about economic development and our industrial land base. We've got to do a better job of maximizing our industrial land base. We have to do, and in partnership with the EDC, we've got to do a good job of making sure that we have a strong economic future here in Clallam County. You know,
Yeah,
I think
I would love to comment on that, but I can wait till the end. I don't know how we got to where we are with all sorts of, industrial land where there are no services, where there are no urban services. What the heck were we thinking 8 years ago or 16 years ago or 24 years ago, whenever that came up? How did we end up with that? So anyway, we can have that conversation once you're done, Holden.
that's a fantastic question. It's something that we think we need to change. We need to play to our strengths. Is really what I think it is. But we also have to, again, realize that in the economic world, we are not Port Angeles, which is where I live and where our county courthouse is not the same economy that it was 20 years ago. You know, I think there's probably some people on this call who've seen the closure of more than one mill in our region, and what that does to our community economy. And so, how do we address that on the front end? How do we set up again policies in place that we can be successful with? The next one Bruce mentioned, and I'll mention again, I think it's really important. You know, as we look at this climate resiliency element that is now mandatory for us, is figuring out how to apply or to fill this goal, and realize that we can use this as a tool and not rather just saddling ourselves with additional regulatory requirements. And so really looking at, again, how to implement something that prepares us, as Bruce said, to weather whatever storm comes our way. And then hopefully how to parlay that into future success, whether it's in housing or whether it's in the economic development sphere, or whatever sphere it is, utilizing climate resiliency to our benefit. And then the last one, I think, as someone who's worked in the planning field, which I'm very excited about, is the idea of maybe a limited consolidation of our zoning districts. We have so many different, rural commercial zones that I think it creates maybe there might be one land use that's different from this zone to this next zone. And so how do we consolidate that to simplify that and make it a little bit easier for that development community to know what they're working with? And so with that, the last slide, and we can take some questions, it's just our contact information. This is Bruce's email and my email. As we go through this process, we hope that you are able to attend our community workshops and are able to participate in our public engagement plan. But at the end of the day, you can always call us, you can always email us. And I already see a hand raised by Laurel Black. And so is this the time to get into questions, Colleen?
Sure. Go ahead, Laurel.
Laurel, yeah.
Okay, thank you. This is a great presentation, and I'm so glad that this kind of outreach has been made a priority for for community development. It's great that you're making you're prioritizing community input. My question is one of the challenges that everyone faces in community development, I'm sure, is how to handle disparities or conflicts created by state mandates that impact abilities of communities to increase housing accessibility and affordability. And it seems like you don't have a lot of wiggle room there for negotiation when the state says, oh, okay, well, you have to add all these LEED requirements because we think they're cool, or whatever their reasoning is. What ways do you have to deal with that will address the needs of our community for more affordable and accessible housing? Well,
good question. And it's the $1 million question in many respects. Two thoughts on it. Number one, have a loud and consolidated voice. That means with the Board of Commissioners, with other agencies, with the what is it, the North Olympic Peninsula, what, help me out, Colleen, it's the policy.
Association.
I'm sorry?
Oh, North Olympic Development Council?
Well, the development councils, yeah, the EDC also. But the point is that we need our voice heard. Work with our state legislatures and keep working with them. The one thing I will say that I've noticed, and this is the other part of my response, is in years past when I would attend training or seminars or whatever for planners and such, there was always kind of a general acceptance of the law is the law and so on. But in the training and seminars that I've attended recently, there's been a real increase in kind of what the heck are you doing? You know, what to the state. So there's a recognition that the fixes are creating their own problems, and that they have been for some time. And in fact, every legislative session that we've seen the last 3 go-rounds, there's been some proposals and some pushes to try to reel in things like the continued changes that the State Building Code Council kind of throws our way, not only for energy code, but also for the new wildland urban interface. There's also court cases going on right now regarding the latter, and we don't even really know what the outcome is going to be. And yet we're scheduled at this point to implement both the new energy code requirement and the wildland urban interface code on March 15th. And it's very nebulous. So stay tuned. I think the tide's turning a little, not completely pulling everything back, but at least recognizing that we've reached a point of diminished return.
Do you have any suggestions for support that would help you from the community?
Well, I recommend going to leg.wa.gov to monitor changes. This is a short session this year, but there's still stuff related to the GMA. And there's things that the legislature, especially there's a Senate bill that Senator Vanderweg is sponsoring to kind of reduce the requirements, the onerous requirements in the wildland urban interface, and it's actually out of committee and now going to the House. So that one's got some traction. But monitor those and let your legislators know. Communicate with them.
You were referring to NOLA, North Olympic
Thank
Legislative
you.
Alliance.
I don't know why I had
Yeah.
well, I do know why, I'm getting old, but yeah, NOLA is another one. The point is we need a community voice in Olympia, and we're not the only ones. There's other community voices in rural communities throughout Washington State. If we form one chorus, they will inevitably have to listen.
Mm-hmm. So Jim?
Hey, thank you, Bruce. Over time, I've been here now going on 18 years. Over time, it seems like each incremental change to the Growth Management Act and the related statutes and everything like that points to more prescriptivity. In other words, more of a top-down approach. At what point and how can we, during this iteration of the plan update, how can we bring to the forefront the old, I think it's a common law concept of quiet enjoyment of one's property? And of course, that, you know, a regulatory taking is the extreme of that, but a lot of people, myself included, have moved here because we want to be kind of not told what to do with every aspect of our life. How do we accommodate the cultural aspect of Clallam County, where we want to just enjoy our property and not be told how much additional cost we're going to have to incur because of all these great ideas that come along from Olympia, you know, seemingly every year?
Well, You do what you have control over. Part of that is participating in this process so that the policies and regulatory requirements that do come out of it, if any, are done so in a way that are reflective of your values. The other piece of this, again, I think dovetails back into our voice in Olympia. You know, there's a lot of legislators who are kind of pursuing one agenda, kind of pursuing an agenda direction. That's law. At some point, there's really not a lot we can do about that, you know, on the specific individual case. But we have to think about this as a struggle that goes on for a long time. And by becoming a part of that process, we are able to affect it. And that's my only recommendation. We can't not follow the law. That becomes problematic for a variety of reasons, but we can at least affect the law. So,
Darlene?
Excellent presentation, Bruce and Holden. Thank you very much.
thank you.
But we're still working from the 1990s, as you know, Bruce, been in your office a few times, on the enforcing vegetative buffers in streams and wetlands. Where are you now with that list of speaking to particular property owners, how they can work with you to protect those and work on the buffers?
We haven't gotten into that as a planning issue just yet, but that's one of the key components that we will be dealing with. What Darlene is referring to is our critical areas code. Just short, and I'll be quick because I know we're out of time, but changes in state law and more directly court cases has kind of done away with vesting when it comes to ongoing agricultural operations. So people who have been farming a particular piece of land where the actively farmed area is incurring into a buffer now has to recognize that buffer. One of the things that I would like to see happen is developing voluntary compliance. I forget the exact term, but we can use the conservation district to work with landowners to bring them into compliance, to assist them with that effort rather than just holding a hammer over their head. We are also a complaint-driven, we are complaint-driven in Clallam County, so we respond when we receive a complaint, and at this point, it's not widespread. So to be proactive, if we work with the Conservation District, we can gain compliance before it becomes a problem, before it's something where we have to respond and hold a hammer over their head. So that's the direction I would like to see us go, where we implement that kind of a voluntary compliance program.
So my question that I alluded to earlier was that, you know, we are economically distressed. We have a big housing issue. There's work to try to, you know, figure out how to lower the cost of homes. But the thing that I'm always working on is how do we increase our median household income? And so there are so many opportunities that flow through the EDCs that we can't respond to for different reasons. One often is we don't have enough power out here, utilities, and a lot of these companies that are very innovative, very technologically advanced, require a lot of power. But another issue is that we don't have industrially zoned and contiguous pieces of property. Oftentimes it's 40 to 100 acres that they need that have services. So Bruce, you and I have looked at the county maps and looked at where there is industrial property, and people always think the airport is that, but unfortunately the FAA requires that be aviation related. So, you know, and then we looked out in Clallam Bay CQ, and the prison out there is zoned heavy industrial, which why isn't that zoned government? And then all the properties around it, and it doesn't have urban services for, and how did that happen? And then how are we going to balance the NIMBYism of, which is just I think a common phenomenon that exists in American society, or the bananas, which I love that one. It stands for build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. Yeah. So how, we have needs. How do you end up balancing between the needs of the greater community and what, individuals may not want in their backyard?
You keep trying, you keep advocating. As far as the history of this, citing industrial areas is very difficult. It's great if you have no neighbors, but we don't have that situation near our urban growth areas. And that's the other thing, is they kind of have to be sited near urban growth areas where services are available, as you alluded to. So I think one of the areas that offers great potential is west of Port Angeles. Now, not everybody out there wants that. So it's also a political process of kind of gaining compliance, having an understanding. We have a zoning designation out there, which is, I think, industrial reserve. And it was given that designation because there were no services. And so it's sort of intended as future industrial land once we're able to get services out there. So this is part of a broader discussion. How do we assist the city, for example, for number one, solving its internal service network issues, and then having the capacity to then reach out and do the additional service. It's a heavy lift. There's a lot of cost involved. It's not easy. And there's political opposition. It really does represent sort of the impossibility of land use planning, but that's no reason to stop. We need it, and it needs to happen. It's all part of the well-being of our community as we go forward. So there has to be a careful hand-holding and explanation of why we're going in the direction we're going. There are, it just has to go that way, and it has to get done. So we will be doing it. We will be proposing it. Will we be successful? I don't know. I sure hope so.
Got it. All right. Well, with that, thank you very much, Bruce and Holden, for joining us, and everyone. It's going to be an interesting next 16 months or so. And I know you guys are hard at work, so thank you for that. And I know you'll have more of these events where you can get input from the community. So with that, everyone, thank
Colleen?
you. Yes.
Number one, I do want to say thank you to everyone who came to the presentation, but also there was a list of questions that got put into the chat that we did not have a chance to get to. Mm-hmm. Would there be an opportunity maybe to have this chat forwarded to staff or something like that? Just because sure. I hate for somebody to have just sure. put their question in the wrong way.
Or we'll go ahead and if you guys have a few minutes for those questions in the chat, we could continue this. And but I will and this will be up on our website, the recording. So if you want, I see one, let's see, I think there's two here, right? I've heard one is from Jeff Tozier. I've heard several times from county leaders that public engagement is an important and appreciated part of the process. The last meeting about Town Road held in September solicited public discussion, but did not allow for oral comment. With so much new information having come to light regarding Town Road, how does the DCD plan to restore public's trust in future projects? Will there be an opportunity for the public to ask questions and receive answers? Will there be another public meeting? I don't know,
so I'll
Jeff,
jump
was
on
that
one
specifically about Town Road, or is that more generally?
Well, I'm gonna address it generally for the comp plan, since that's what I'm here to talk about. But basically, I really do. I encourage the members of the community when we get to that stage where we have our public participation plan to really take a look at that and figure out how many different avenues that they can provide input for. Again, as a part of this process with the comp plan, it is essential that we do have those public meetings and that we do have open dialogues around these issues. And so whether on the East End, West End, or right here in PA, we'll have those meetings, and we'll probably have some sort of roadshow where we'll go around and have the same conversations everywhere that we can. You know, again, we really do recognize that there's value in that community trust, and that it's very important that we work and strive to you know, not just have that trust, but to build that trust through all of our processes. And so with that, again, will there be an opportunity for the public to ask questions or receive answers? Yes.
Right.
Will there be another public meeting? Well, I think I've said I've done this presentation twice now, and we'll probably do some more as well. And
Yep.
so I'm really looking forward to that.
Great. Thanks, Holden. Then Pat had a question. Bruce mentioned that ADUs will be allowed everywhere. I think that was just in the UGAs, right? Let's see. Will the county adopt 4 or 5 plans to eliminate the backlog in building permits as PA has done? Also, will there be restricted short-term rentals? So we are adding housing and not just density.
Well, to answer the question, we will be at a minimum allowing for 2 ADUs in urban growth areas. We're required to. It also depends on what the corresponding cities are adopting, because we want our development strategies to be similar, you know, to harmonize well with what they're doing, again, because, you know, the unincorporated urban growth area is also designed to be part of the city eventually. So we don't want those to conflict. As far as pre-approved plans, I believe is what you're talking about. I think it's an excellent idea. There's some challenges to overcome. There's concerns from from members of the development community about that, but I think it has been used with great effect in other jurisdictions. And in fact, we did it for a while prior to my getting here. I'd like to see that happen again. And what was the other part of it back? Okay.
Short-term rentals.
Yeah, short-term rentals are a tricky thing, as I'm sure folks in the city of Port Angeles have figured out. And there's no question, you know, anything that increases demand for housing has an effect. But it's the degree of effect that is of question, and it's also balancing that degree of effect with benefits of economy, of tourism that's generated. So we have to, our board is not keen on moving ahead with regulatory control at this point. Rather, they're interested in seeing inventory and analysis done on the degree of effect. And unless that degree is substantial, it won't justify doing a regulatory program at this point. So the fact is, we don't know. It's a question that I think we do need to answer out of diligence, and I'm eager to see it answered, but it's not something we're willing to just jump in with an assumption that it's creating a problem and we need to solve it, because we simply don't know that, or the degree to which that is.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. I think we covered all the questions, and Holden, thanks for suggesting that. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording and wish everyone a great day. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thanks.